So I'm here this morning. I'm with Adam Werbach from Yurtle.com, criminy sakes, from so many other areas in life. He's one of my idols. He's an evox star already, and you guys should know him. You should know his platforms. You should get to know what he's committed to in life. He's just an extraordinary person, and I'm just privileged to have the opportunity to be with you today. And so I'd like you to tell the evox viewers out there, what's Yurtle?
Sure. I mean, Yurtle is a sharing platform with a really simple idea of making it as easy to get something from a friend or someone who's getting rid of something as it is to buy something new. You know, when you think about it, just because you have a need for something doesn't mean that we need to get something ripped from the earth, manufactured in something, taken, shipped to a store and sold to you. You know, there's a good chance that a neighbor or someone down the street has got that thing that you're looking for. So it might be a kid's bike or a tent or an odd piece of kitchenware that you might need. The chances are it's already there, and our challenge is basically to say, can we take about 25% of the things that we're buying today and find them within our own networks?
So, but right now you have your mobile app on iOS.
Yep.
Do you have a Droid app too yet?
No, we just launched it on iOS, and we'll go out in a couple months. We'll have the Droid app out too now. Yeah.
So you're located in San Francisco. How have you seen your community grow?
We're based in San Francisco, so that's where we've sort of started. It goes faster every week. So at this point, thousands of items are moving, about 22,000 people who are kind of actively involved in it. And the best thing is just kind of hearing the feedback of how people are beginning to think about finding things from their friends, finding things in the network instead of buying new things. So there was a mom I was talking to, she's actually having a third child, and she's sort of a pro mom at this point, and everything that she brought into her home for her new baby came from Yurtle. All the plastic gear and the things that the bouncy seats and the stroller and all of that. And about 6 months later, she gave it all away. She sort of passed on. She was like, I know how to do this. I don't want to have all that plastic crap in my house after the baby doesn't need it anymore, so I'm going to move it along. It was kind of neat to see someone just sort of thinking about how to socialize that.
That's amazing. So background, what leads you to create such an amazingly cool company like Yurtle?
You're too kind. I guess I've always been someone who believes that we have to do whatever we can to basically fight climate change. I mean, I met Al Gore, I think when I was 13, and he just scared the shit out of me.
Why so?
Well, it was like a small house party that I got invited to, like 6 or 8 people, and he was thinking about running for president at the time, and that was probably 86 or something like that, and I think he was kind of depressed and just went on for tired for about 2 hours about all the things about climate change that no one knew. And again, 1986, we kind of knew everything we know now. I mean, we know it in more detail now about the threat to the planet, but we knew it then, and frankly, we knew it in the late 70s. We didn't know if it was going to be hot or cold, but we did know that we were facing a change because of our CO2 releases. So since that time, I've been trying to figure out what can we do, and basically my path from that period, to certainly through my 20s was just basic activism, right? Just asking the simple question, how do we stand up and do something about it? So in high school, I started a group called the Sierra Student Coalition, and we worked in protecting land, the California desert, and trying to pass legislation on climate change, which didn't work. I got elected to the board of the Sierra Club in college, and then became the president of the Sierra Club, and I worked on the Kyoto negotiations. And it was such a depressing thing to be there and having to fight the Kyoto negotiations, because we knew even then that they weren't going to, they weren't going to be adequate, even if they were eventually approved, which they weren't. And I continued on with activism through that time. A little bit later, I began to sort of understand that there was a limit to the big government solution to climate change, and that's actually when I got involved with working with companies and trying to figure out how corporate change could work. And it was probably around 2004, 2005. That I was approached by Walmart, which was a company that it sort of epitomized everything that was evil. It was like, who's on the phone? It's the devil. He'd like to speak to you. But it was not a welcome call. It was sort of like I think it was sort of an expression of my kind of complete failure in the early period of my life. But I definitely became entranced by the possibility that what could happen if the world's largest company at the time could get its 60,000 suppliers to begin to take on sustainability, or particularly just basic environmental compliance, and then to eventually to leadership. What could happen? And I mean, truthfully, to their credit, and I think to a lot of other companies, sustainability is no longer the sort of evil, foul-mouthed word that you had to stay away from, for hippies and freaks. It's something that means good business, which we were talking about for yourself. But so I think that period of time was a really interesting one. But honestly, as depressed as I was, after Kyoto, I sort of feel a little bit the same way around sustainability in large corporations, where that it's sort of peaking. And a lot of my last assignments were working on things like make this box smaller, make this laundry detergent more efficient, make it so we can make it with less energy, make a compostable cup. And the problem is that if you're still selling more things, even if there are better things, there's just something wrong, and the math doesn't add up. And when you're looking at something at the size and scale of climate change, there's just no way we can do it through just making things a little bit incrementally better. That was a long answer. I don't know if you're going to cut that.
No, it's great. There's so much in it. One of the things that we're working on at evox right now is we definitely don't want people to be left with that there's gurus outside of themselves. So one of our internal tags is "You are your own guru," and so we want people to really know that they have what it takes, and evox is kind of a middleman, a partner in elevating people and their choices and consciousness. A resource. You had an extraordinary background and a huge amount of success. How do you tell people in their 20s or 18s or teens, when they have a vision, how do they keep that vision alive and sparked? And I don't know if you had a bunch of mentors around you, if you found yourself as one of the phenomenons that just sees a path and you just driven for that. But I think that's one thing that we're all kind of concerned with is I really want to empower people no matter where they are, is that there's small changes you can make. You don't have to be overwhelmed by trying to get over there as fast as you can, and I think that exhausts and burns people out. How do you think you kept your fuel fired and your spark going?
Well, I mean, certainly great people surrounding me and supporting me, from my parents to really my true mentor in life was an activist named David Brower. David really is kind of the founder of the modern environmental movement, the political movement. He was the first executive director of the Sierra Club in the 1950s. He was the person who's basically largely responsible for the fact there's not a dam in the Grand Canyon right now, and he kind of invented the modern environmental campaign. And I read a book about him, which I recommend to everyone, by John McPhee, called Encounters with the Archdruid, which is one of the most brilliantly written books that you'll ever read. But really a story of one man's fight against this kind of crushing move towards damming rivers and tearing up mountains. And he really was, he was kind of a crazy guy, but very patient and slow with me, and just welcomed me into the world of activism. So I'm very grateful to him and to lots of other folks. I mentioned that conversation with Al Gore. Everyone knows Al Gore as this vice president, I think, but really it was just a little house party with some schmuck, some 13-year-old kid. I don't think he even, I don't know if he remembers I was there, but he really affected me at that moment. And you think about all the people just having dinner conversations with an impressionable child around the table, and what are they talking about? Is that dinner conversation, does that matter? Does that count? And thinking about their own kids, are the kids looking at you, and are they seeing the choices that you're making? Is that something that inspires you? And if you're 18, my God, you've got everything. The power that you have in your phone right now is so much more than activists of yore. So there's no reason that people shouldn't be starting movements and changing things. I think I was probably smarter when I was 18 than I am now. I think most people are. So.
Interesting. Have you heard of a company called Greenwish before? Ed Begley started it along with Raphael Savage, and what they've really done is they've leveraged their nonprofit as a kind of an Uber nonprofit, and they've worked with this bank in Kansas City who will basically, you can operate under their operation. So if you have a vision for any nonprofit you want to start, all you have to do is get a board of 5 people, and the checking account gets set up immediately, and Ed will go out there and talk on your behalf and help you raise money for a particular focus group, and he'll bring in lots of resources.
I love it.
It's really great, and I think they're making it easier, because sometimes when people want to start something new, the business side of it can be overwhelming, and the thought of getting it all put up. So that's one thing that they're doing that is, I think, really innovative.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing.
Yeah.
So mission-driven company. I'm assuming you guys operate from some documents, or your B Corp?
Yeah, we're
In certification right now?
No, what we are is a certified California for-benefit corporation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the tax code, it is the success of B Corps is now that this is actually in the code. So we're following it. So we followed Patagonia as when the code changed in California and became one. And we basically are driven by a mission to reduce the number of new things we all have to buy by 25%. And it's interesting, a 25% reduction in new expenditures would mean a savings of really thousands of dollars for the average American, and an increase in the number of experiences and joy that they could have. So like I mentioned, Patagonia, they're one of the companies we're working with. And one of the things we're talking about with them is how do you rate a jacket, not just by how long it lasts, but how many experiences it has, right? So like, instead of miles per gallon, what's the experiences per jacket, or miles per jacket? And how do you make sure that that jacket doesn't ever sit, in a closet, lonely, sad, away from a trail, but on the trail? How do you make sure that things get much more utilization? Because right now we have a very much a model where we all own things, keep them in our own garage, keep them in our own closets, where they get dusty and get old and get outmoded frequently. Instead of building things that will last forever, right? That can be passed on, repaired, reused, enjoyed, and for all that time that they can just sort of they can be liquid in that sense, which is it's not such a crazy idea. It's just it's just a new idea.
So when you look at the outreach that you have for Yurtle right now, so right now we're OTT, so meaning we're digital television, we're IPTV based. So we have, we're on Roku right now, Apple TV, Samsung Smart TVs just came out, Xbox by the end of the month. So that gives us in US distribution about 68 million potentials. Now that's potentials, that's like Nielsen's, right? So when you look at reach out with Yurtle, how are you reaching out to people? What's kind of, how can we support you reaching out more people, subscribing and participating in the conversation?
Well, I think we should think about integration, really. I mean, that's Yurtle is built on a really, a core set of APIs that basically allow items to move. So, the question is, right now, retailers, which is in a sense what you're functioning as, do all sorts of loss leaders, right, in order to get people to come check in things that way. And we kind of think that free things should be the loss leaders. In other words, if you walk into Home Depot looking for a drill, maybe you'll get the drill for free, but then the other things that you have to buy, the bits, the work belt, the extension cord, you might actually have to buy there, but you're getting the core thing that you wanted for free. And there's plenty of money to make in the other places, but the reason you walk into that store, the reason why because there's a chance you can actually get the core thing you're looking for no cost. So it builds a larger shopping basket for people, but it does so by basically removing the kind of the core resource consumption question right now for us, which is that big charismatic mega item that frankly doesn't need to be new all the time.
How did your NBC Universal partnership? You did something this year, I think. Yeah. Was it with Bravo, and you did it with a lot of the late night folks?
Across all the different networks. It worked really well. I mean, for them, it was a really interesting way to actually think about how for Earth Day they could encourage their viewers to connect somehow. So we had people from all over the country just sharing items and open. And truthfully, Yurtle before we had that partnership was a relatively closed network. It was only people based on your Facebook friends, so you could only see the things that your Facebook friends had, which is cool, sort of private in that way. But one thing we learned through NBC is that people are really very generous and willing to give their things to anyone who will put it to good use. Not everything, but there's a large set of people who just are happy to see something used. And the economic piece of it it's not their primary goal. The primary goal is to see it used, get into good hands, and feel good about it. And then they can find, hopefully on the same network, things that they need. And that's, again, that sounds like a crazy kind of hippie ideal, but what we discovered really through NBC, interestingly, through a big company, was that actually people have that sort of generosity of heart and want to do it. So we had people from, Mississippi sharing people from North Carolina that they'd never met, but both of them like zombie shows, and that was enough. They were both into the Chiller Network, and they both liked zombie shows was a reason enough that they could be sharing things. So there are other reasons for people to share that are kind of psychographic, as opposed to just being the fact that I know you and we live near each other.
It was, I loved watching it. I thought it was a great campaign, just watching what was happening. It was really cool to follow. How about, let's see, I have a question on companies inside the sustainable space. You see more and more larger corporations new initiatives. And sometimes you wonder, I mean, I think one thing we've been dealing with is, I don't know if I want to say it this way, but it's almost like an innate skepticism and resignation with dealing with big businesses, like Chevy being at South by Southwest or Ford being at LOHAS, and watching that, and you kind of wonder, I see people in the audience kind of like sitting back and kind of like looking at them like this, like, really, what's the agenda here? And it's something that I think we're facing at evōx too, is, how do we break through some of that cynicism? Like, it's a new world, and collaboration is what we're about. Like, we really are just interested, like, companies are just made of people, and people are inherently, where I stand, are good. And so finding great people and elevating the voices that, make a difference on the planet. How do you view the current kind of temperature or climate of how it seems more and more very large corporations are having more sustainable initiatives? How much of it is, I know this is a very hard question to answer, but do you feel like it's now just on trend to have these practices, it's good business practices, or is some of it kind of inauthentic and kind of put on to get a $1.4 trillion market?
I guess I like good work, so if people are doing good things, I'll support them in doing that. Having somewhat a history of some of these companies, there have definitely been times they have done things that are not right. So I don't forget those.
You don't what?
I don't forget those.
You don't forget those. Okay.
So yeah, one of the car companies you mentioned, I remember I was producing a television show, and they threatened the network to basically pull all of their advertising from that show if they broadcast our show about climate change. This was probably 10, 12 years ago.
Wow.
Now it's great that they're now on the path and gets climate change. And truthfully, it probably was that was a signal of someone lower down who didn't have the right message. But whatever it was, these are big institutions that aren't necessarily authentically built as sustainable institutions. Mm-hmm. And so they suffer from gigantism. They're big, they take big steps, and many of those steps are good, but you also have to prepare and understand that they might change direction. So I think that's the piece, and the challenge one, I think, that when you look at collaboration with large companies, there's nothing that says they'll be there next month doing that same thing. We hope, we should make it work for them, we should encourage them, we should do it, but there's no guarantee in that. That can change from a board, from an investor, from a CEO change. You look at the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club is going to be supporting the environment next year, 10 years from now, 30 years from now. Chevy, I hope they'll do it because it's good for their business and the right thing to do, and it's the direction they're heading now. So we have to encourage them, support them, and not mock them. But we also have to be aware, okay, this is not why they were started. This is not their mission. So we have to manage it accordingly.
I think that's a really good thought, because you have to, where did they start from? Where were they created from? That's what the mission they're fulfilled on, and that wasn't inherently in the design. So it kind of gives you like, okay, well then, how do you start to have these conversations with these corporations to go, okay, well, it's time to update your mission statements if you're really interested in that.
Yeah, or your organization. I mean, that's where I don't mean to pick on Chevy because I think they're actually doing some great things now, this is an institution change, and the only way to guarantee it, most of the work I've done with companies has been training and development inside the companies, because if you change the way that people think who work for those companies, you've changed the company. Everything else is just pattern, right? If you have the top merchants, the top designers, the top buyers, top sellers, the accountants, if they all get it, and they get why it's important, then they'll make it work. They'll work out the details. And a lot of the mistakes I think we've made has been very functional. Let's change the compliance rule. Let's attack them on this instead of actually really reaching out kind of aspirationally. Why is it a better business for car companies and retailers and product manufacturers to think about sustainability as core to their business? I wrote a book for Harvard Business Press called Strategy for Sustainability, and the idea was really simply like, this makes you a better business. It really wasn't like, one of the outcomes is that we'll protect an earth for us all to live on, but that's not why you should do this. You should do this because it is insane for you to run a business without thinking about it in the longer term. It is insane, and it will accrue you liabilities and risks that you do not want. And I think basically that message is now widely held among Fortune 500 companies. When I wrote that book, it was 2009. I started writing in 2008. In 2008, you had still 20 or 30 or 50 Fortune 500 companies who were actively anti-sustainability. Like they would fund it, they would say it, and they would there's no one who does that now. I mean, a few oil and extraction companies, but besides that, you don't really have wolves in wolves clothing anymore. You don't have people saying that they don't, which is good actually. Now I got to get people who still retain those thoughts and they haven't completely understand why this is the right path for them to follow.
Well, changing consumers' attitudes and beliefs is something that we're trying to work on right now, and we have to do it so subtly. Some of the work we've been doing is talking about brain science. How are neurons firing? How do you change neurons firing? When you're starting looking at these kind of new modes of how we think people think. What do you think are some of the best leverage points to create a new type of consumer? A consumer that is fundamentally really authentically interested in what they purchase or what they don't purchase, and the reasoning for those things. How do you think is great ways to leverage or access that with people?
So, actually I'll talk about it a little bit today in my talk, but there's something called the dopamine D4 receptor, which is basically the novelty-seeking gene that exists in humans. And it was developed not that long ago, 40 to 50,000 years ago, in a period of great migration from Africa, where basically natural selection chose the people who looked for the next thing. It was the people who were sticking their fingers in the proverbial electric sockets, and had electric sockets at the time. Those are the people who actually survived because humanity needed to move and spread out and diversify in order to survive. So people who had this receptor and who actually really reacted strongly to new things in the bushes, to new tastes, new feelings, new scents, were the ones who were selected for. And we're very much descendants of that. So when you see how marketing has spent the last 200 years, really the last 75, really cueing that gene, saying here's the new thing, and this is why you should get it because it's new. It's not rationally better because it's new. It's just our brain is actually built for that. And all the science of brain plasticity says that we can change that. But the things that are the antidotes for it are actually really old-fashioned things like community, love. The research from the positive psychologists in this really show that the things that kind of pull us into flow, into that experience where we're actually kind of feeling that we're all in our best, those are not things like the sort of hedonistic buying things. That doesn't actually do that. It's actually that experience where you know what you're doing and you're actually acting in it. When you're feeling like you're in community and you're experiencing that, and when you're giving back, they actually tested giving back against sex and chocolate, and you might not be surprised, but sex and chocolate blew giving away out of the water to start with, because people really prefer them and they make it great. But they actually don't even last as long. So that the kind of pleasure and the happiness that comes from being sexually fulfilled or eating lots of chocolate lasts hours. But the type of fulfillment that you feel from giving back and being part of a community lasts days and weeks. So when you ask for what's the antidote for consumerism, it's things that we know. It's love, it's community, it's being with people you care about, and it's having a sense of purpose that you're actually giving back to something larger than yourself. Kind of good news, I guess.
It's great news because it's so simple. It doesn't require a whole lot of change in attitudes and research. That's what we already have access to.
Yeah, it's what all the great religions tell us. It's all the great spiritual practices tell us. It's kind of common sense.
Two things that inspire you most about your life right now.
I live I guess I live constantly inspired right now, and I've got 3 young kids, and they're sort of seeing the world through their eyes, and the joy of that is, I guess that's 3 things. But
that's one aspect. Yeah,
but
that's great.
Yeah, that's my greatest inspiration right now.
Well, you're really inspiring. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And for everyone in evōx, you have to go to yurtle.com, get an account. It's very easy on iOS. It's a brand new updated app in the last 2-3 weeks. Yeah, great experience. It's just easy to make a difference and reduce consumerism and be able to share. And as Adam was saying, like community building. It's really community building to be able to share yourself that way with other people. And we're a fan. We can't wait to see more successes with you. I mean, I know you have a stream of successes, and we're just proud to have you with us. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much.
Yeah.